when you are going for something that is so monumental that it means everything to you, you have to be willing to pay everything for that.
How do I establish consistency with my workouts, with my meals, with hitting my macros? It's beginning with the discipline of just being able to write it down on your calendar. If you don't have it in front of you, if your workouts aren't scheduled every single week, if your meals aren't planned out, if your food isn't prepped, that has to be that starting point if you're going to have that intensity and that discipline. It's got to be on the schedule, and it's got to be one of like your non-negotiables. It's no, I'm hitting my workout no matter what, because guess what? Once it's on your schedule, it's going to force you to create that time for it.
If you can't see it in front of you, it will not happen. The likelihood of it just drops immensely. Hey everybody, welcome to the Mind Muscle Connection. I'm Joe Klemczewski with Tyler Wiebe. We're going to talk about a topic that I think has a little bit of controversy behind it. We can't seem to stay away from it in different fashions. Tyler, you brought this topic up, so I'm going to let you kind of intro why you think it's so important. But intensity, discipline, that just undeniable passion to say, I'm going all in on something. And not just the kind of mental toughness or discipline that's like, yeah, I have to go study for that biology exam, but I mean, I'm going to sink my life on this. I'm going to do anything it takes. So good, bad, what do we do with that?
I think it depends on the person and what they're devoting their whole life to, and whether it's going to be worth it to them in the end or not. And I think that's a big decision that one has to make, like when they're embarking on making that decision. I'm always kind of fascinated by lately, like just elite athletes and their mindset and their discipline, and just how do they get to X level when there's whatever this many people still within that industry, within that sport, but yet they are still number one. You have the elite of the elite, and then you still have the elite above that. And so really just kind of diving into that mindset, and what does that take to get you to there. And you listen to these interviews and you listen to these people talk, and the one thing, the reoccurring theme is always they're the ones showing up day in, day out, no matter how they feel, and they're still doing what they need to get done to either A, reach that greatness, or B, once they're there, to keep it there. And that's how do we maybe not to that end, we're not all going to be elite athletes, but what can we borrow, from that type of mindset that we can apply to our own lives? That's, what kind of fascinates me in this arena.
I think most people tackle this topic with a little bit of kind of both hands, and they want to be, quote, balanced. And I think there's just a lot of weakness in that when you do look at somebody who goes all in, as you said, first of all, it reminds me of the Last Dance documentary with Michael Jordan. If you haven't seen that, I don't care who you are, what you do, it's well worth watching. It does show somebody who was not just at the top of his game, but literally almost reinventing the sport. And it was profoundly inspirational in that regard, in that I just couldn't stop watching it. I watched it all in one sitting, but it also left me profoundly sad, because I think you can take it to such an extreme that it does destroy you. It destroys other people around you. And you can still have that intensity. You can still achieve those kinds of things. And it's not that you're keeping score of your balance in terms of a daily metric, like, oh, I have my work time, I have my family time, I have this. That's where I think people trip up, because there are sometimes you do have to devote more time to one thing. There are sometimes you can take a break and unplug. But when you are going for something that is so monumental that it means everything to you, you have to be willing to pay everything for that. So I want to first just throw out one principle, which is single-mindedness. And again, it doesn't mean I'm single-minded 24 hours of the day, but it means it is the only thing that matters to me right now. I'm not going to have this that I block schedule for 2 hours on Friday, and I'm not going to do this, and I'm not going to make sure I take my evenings off. And it's this, I'm getting this one thing done, and then I can set it aside. And that's where I think somebody in a Michael Jordan situation, you have to look at that even as seasonally. But just in terms of single-mindedness, you only have enough resources and bandwidth mentally, time-wise, and that's the cost I think you have to count.
Yeah, because we have talked a lot about having balance, mindset, things like that, a lot over in these podcasts. But yeah, if you are going to go down this route, you have to understand that you are going to be sacrificing some type of balance. It's going to come with that territory. And, that's something that I think is very, it can be very individualistic. Like, we have to be able to kind of really understand ourselves of like, if I make this sacrifice, yeah, it does the benefit come, okay. Am I okay with the cost, with the sacrifice of that balance? Is that ultimately, what I want to do, ultimately what's going to make me happy? Because if that is the case, well, that sacrifice probably becomes a little bit easier, right? Because you do realize, hey, you know what? Like, I'm sacrificing this for an amount of time. I will most likely be able to come back to it, but I know that this is going to pay off for myself in the future as long as, I complete the task.
I'll give you an example. You could ask me about any movie, any sitcom, or any album from the 1990s. I couldn't tell you a thing about it. I totally missed a decade because I did a bachelor's, a master's, a doctorate, joined a company, rose to the management team, left town, started my own business, my own career, and started a family. I mean, yeah. that was the 90s.
Yeah, that'll cost someone a decade.
and during that time, to go to school, for example, when I was at the IU Medical School in Indianapolis, working 3, 4, 5 jobs at a time. At one point in undergrad, I was working 2 full-time jobs and going to school full-time. And so again, sacrifice. I did whatever it took. Nothing was going to stop me. I have not worked that hard since. I now, after rearing 4 children, there's no way I could, but that was my time to plow that field, gain that ring. And then it afforded me the opportunities to do other things with varying levels of discipline. So if you look at my life, if you look at the seasons of time that I was devoting more to parenting, there was a time when my kids were younger where I would intentionally say no to travel and speaking opportunities. I reined back very intentionally because I wanted all of that intensity and discipline focused on my family. So again, it really depends on how you measure your time in terms of metrics, but I do think it has to be incredibly single-minded.
Yeah, it's how do you measure your time? How do you measure your happiness? We've got one shot at this. And so what is it that you want to spend your time doing? And I think, and I mean, I know myself included, we can easily get caught up, is this the wrong way? Is this the right way? What should I do? And unfortunately, we can't quite tell the future yet in our evolution. And so, we do have to take those chances, and we do have to be okay, I think, putting ourselves out there to learn, right? I think we get so afraid of trying to do something because, we're afraid we're going to fail or this or that. But then we're always left wondering, well, what if? And, I don't think there's anything wrong with chasing after that what if, giving it a go, and then realizing, hey, guess what? This wasn't for me. That's a hard thing to reconcile yourself with and not feel like a failure and that you weren't able to accomplish it. But, I think you could argue that that's someone who understands truly maybe what they want in life and what they're willing to give up and what they're not willing to give up. And I think you're going to find yourself an overall more happier and less stressful person once you're able to figure that out. The hard thing is it's a hard thing to figure out. You do have to take some chances.
And that's why I said the Michael Jordan documentary left me profoundly sad. Not everybody should do what we're describing. Maybe for you, that level of intensity is finishing one course. Maybe that level of intensity is losing 20 pounds. Yeah. It doesn't have to be conquering the world or redefining an entire industry. And that's okay too. I mean, we have to be able to backtrack and unplug. I'm incredibly good at, when I'm done with work, I'm done with work. Like my cell phone is down. It's not with me 24/7. Laptop's closed. I'm out. And that, again, I'm giving intensity to something else at that point. But I want to revisit for my next 2 points after single-mindedness, something we've talked about, which is how to use extrinsic motivation to build intrinsic motivation. And so if you're going to be very, very determined and create this self-discipline, you should have a sequential external goal process. And it's hard not to talk about David Goggins in a thing like this. So he wanted to become a Navy SEAL. Well, what did he have to do first? He had to lose 100 pounds. And then he had to, pass a PT test, run a certain amount of time, do a certain amount of sit-ups, push-ups, et cetera. So it's one rung at a time, just one goal, one goal, one goal, one goal. And what has that done to him after 15 or 20 years? He is intrinsically an entirely different person. But you can't build that intrinsic motivation. You can't craft over an iron, mill, a steel will without having those external tools that keep you along. Some of that's accountability. Some of that's, maybe a support group. Some of it's finding the right avenue, whatever it takes externally, knowing that just like a muscle you're training, you have to build that one step at a time.
Yeah, and didn't he? I think he failed Hell Week like 3 times. He was doing it on like shin splints. I mean, pretty wild, like what he put himself through physically and internally. But again, it just kind of comes back to it doesn't matter how many times you fail, because you're going to keep getting back up and continuing to work towards whatever that goal is. I was kind of thinking about this the other day, just in terms of, like you said, bringing that intensity to losing 20 pounds and things like that. And it's, if you can't see yourself still working towards, some kind of goal a year from now, what makes you think that you're going to accomplish that in 12, 15, 20 weeks? If you can't picture yourself still doing the same thing, might be a different goal. Maybe you're on to the next 20 pounds in a year. But if you can't picture yourself, still doing this 1, 2, 3 years from now, well, then what are you doing? That's probably not going to be something where you're going to want to devote that time and energy to it. And so you need to be able to kind of rethink that and go, okay, maybe, this one isn't for me. I'm not willing to fail, or I'm not willing to get back up after I fail. What are those avenues that I am going to be able to do that in?
And to your point, understand that you will grow, you will change, circumstances will change. It's hard to imagine now, that I'm in my 50s, when you're 20, 30, 40, looking forward, you're looking at with that a 20 or 30-year-old mind, with that 20 or 30-year-old experience. So you think you can plan your whole life out and this is what I want. And then once you get there, it's not at all what I want. And that's okay. We're talking about having any kind of a raging self-discipline to accomplish one thing. And I'm gonna bring up something that we've talked about before, which was the world's leading ADD ADHD expert. He talks very much about how we have to externalize and make time real. So again, we conceptually, in an abstract way, say, okay, here's what I'm going to achieve. We may even have these goals and so forth. But what are you going to do today? Like on your calendar, your electronic calendar, do you have, perhaps let's, talk about meals, workouts, things like that, all those goals. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to run at this time. You have this mapped out, where you can physically see it. Do you have a notebook? Do you have something? He talks a lot, being I believe a psychiatrist, about just the neurobiology of motivation and getting things done. And I absolutely love that, because it goes back to single-mindedness. If you can't see it in front of you, it will not happen. The likelihood of it just drops immensely.
Yeah, that yeah, and that's something that I've been working on a lot with clients, and how do we establish consistency, right? Like how do I establish consistency with my workouts, with my meals, with hitting my macros, this and that. And it's beginning with the discipline of just being able to write it down on your calendar. Like that's where it starts for a lot of people, that they don't even have a calendar. We kind of just fly by the seat of our pants every single day. There's a rough outline, kids got school, kids has this, I've got a haircut on Thursday. We kind of have this loose schedule, but for a lot of the rest of the day, it's kind of, flows, and we kind of just go with it, and we don't really plan for anything. And so, if we're coming back to this idea of single-mindedness with my fitness, and I want to lose 25, 30, 40, 45 pounds. Yeah. And like you said, if you don't have it in front of you, if your workouts aren't scheduled every single week, if your, meals aren't planned out, if your food isn't prepped, I'm not saying you can't have some flexibility. I think you've used the term structured flexibility. Is 80% we want to kind of have this overall structure for our lives and for our goals, but obviously we can't control everything. We need to be flexible with it. So some days we are going to have to do that, but that has to be that starting point if you're going to have that intensity and that discipline. It's got to be on the schedule, and it's got to be one of like your non-negotiables. I'm hitting my workout no matter what, because guess what? Once it's on your schedule, it's going to force you to create that time for it.
How many times have you personally said, Tyler, or have you heard other people say, I work better under pressure? Is that common?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I always follow my macros closer when I'm dieting.
So every time you hear that, I want you to think you're a weak piece of shit.
Oh, think that, yes.
Because, okay, facetiously, of course.
Yeah, no, tongue in cheek, yeah.
But we all work better under pressure because we are truly undisciplined, and that's a symptom of being undisciplined. If I have to have that deadline, it's because I'm not ordering myself with enough discipline or seriousness. As the person I referenced, the researcher, discussed, you're not externalizing time into reality. Biologically, neurologically, you have to do things in a sequence. You can't rush that. If you're going to, again, I'll use academics, you can't study for an entire semester final exam in 2 hours. You need those reps over time.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean also by kind of my fifth point, which is there has to be stakes. In fiction writing, there's always a ticking clock. There's always something to lose. It's an existential threat. You're not even interested in that story unless there's something so at stake that somebody's world is going to end if they don't meet that thing, that goal, that they don't have that character transformation. And if you don't believe that about a goal that you have such desire to accomplish, then it's just not going to be accomplished. It's not. You have to feel that. We know that your brain cannot tell the difference between reality and what you think. That's why anxiety and depression even exist, because we get anxious and depressed over things that haven't even happened. We're just imagining that, and our brain freaks out, releases cortisol and so forth. You have to be good at imposing that level of intensity to be so single-minded that you're willing to use external techniques to build intrinsic motivation. You're willing to externalize your time and schedule because those stakes mean everything. Going back to when I was in school and I wanted to do this, I came from a pretty poor family. We had zero money. I grew up eating government cheese, and, we didn't go to town sometimes because there was no gas in the car. And, at a very young age, I'm like, I'm not doing this. This is not the life I'm going to lead. And so what was my way out? It was opportunity. How do you build opportunity? You get a good career. How do you get a good career? Education. Look at my academic background. Why was I so white hot to pursue academics? Because those were my stakes. That was my reality. If you don't feel that way about what you want most, somebody else does. Somebody else wants it more. You're not going to get it.
Yeah, I've always loved, I'm probably gonna butcher it a little bit, but Ryan Doris's saying of don't try and fake passion, because someone will come around who actually has true passion and, just fuck you up. Like, they will run you over. You cannot fake passion. No matter how much you try and discipline yourself, it just isn't going to happen, because at the end of the day, you're gonna have to have passion for something, and that ultimately is what is going to drive you on those days that you don't feel like doing it, because those days are never going to go away, and they're always going to be there. And so you have to be able to find, that intrinsic motivation on those days to not have, really any big drop off in the type of work that you're in that you're doing. And I kind of want to come back to you also, building that intrinsic motivation and discipline. And it does come from just doing the reps. Like, it truly, truly does. And it sounds boring and it sounds easy, but if it was easy, everyone would do it and we'd all be amazing at things. And so sometimes you just have to remind yourself, hey, I just got to go in today and I just got to put in the reps. Like, just let's go do it. And that's still going to probably move me forward. It may not be my best day, but the reps still got done and I'm still at maintenance, and you can continue to build off maintenance.
Well, that's what I wanted to end with, because I can imagine some people thinking like, damn, like I don't feel that. Like, I wish I could do that. I can get myself to that point and then I don't do those things. And I want to say, even though I mentioned this is not for everybody, not everybody wants to be the next Michael Jordan or the top of your career or whatever. But I do think, and I sincerely believe this, no matter what your temperament, no matter what your character traits, your personality type, I do think everybody does want something. You mentioned this, Tyler, to be passionate about. And if you just think about one thing, it could be so simple. Like, maybe it's just to read one book. I'm going to read a book. Well, I'm tired at night. Well, just read a fucking chapter anyway. Just get it done. Read one chapter a night. That's your goal. If you can accomplish one thing, talk about those reps, talk about building that intrinsic ability, and then the confidence, that the skill transference. Like, it's real. I mean, this is neurochemical wiring. Just the receptors, the neurotransmitters, all of these things change. And I know we like to just think it's psychological. It's our will, it's our mind outside of that. But when you see with fMRI what really happens to your brain when you do that, you would understand why the concept of doing reps and just the repetition and the strengthening, why that's so critical for your brain. Once you do that to your brain, it's a night and day difference. And with one goal accomplished, you can go for a bigger goal. I promise that happens.
Yeah, because the process just starts to become automated and it becomes second nature. And now it's something that, you don't have to necessarily even think about anymore. You just do it. And it just kind of becomes that way over time. Like, you kind of become back to the beginning of the conversation, how it was kind of elite athletes that kind of sparked this conversation. And you take a look at all of these skills, whether shooting a free throw or stick handling a puck, whatever, these skills that we are like, oh my goodness, they're amazing. They're so second nature, because these players have spent umpteenth hours just doing these very basic skills so that they can shuffle them back to the back of the brain. It's an automated process. And then now that frees up other areas for them to now accomplish that next task.
Yep. We are not 100% disciplined about 100% of our things 100% of the time. You have to pick and choose. You have to know what you're going for. You have to craft your life around that and pay the price. So, Tyler, again, I appreciate you. You want to do this topic. I think it's amazing. Again, we've never hit it quite this directly. And that's discipline, I think, in at least one good swipe. So once again, for everybody who watches and listens to the Mind Muscle Connection, we thank you. We look forward to your comments, and we'll see you next time.